This week, we have a double parsha, Tazria and Metzora, and the subject matter of both of these parshas is a very interesting and surprising law, namely the law of tzaraas. When someone does a sin, it could be a variety of sins, but it's a significant sin, and they begin, meaning before the sin, on a very lofty spiritual plane. They're part of God's people. They live in God's land. They are elevated. They are refined. Then, the Torah tells us, that sin would cause a blemish, a spiritual blemish that would have physical manifestations, known as tzaraas. It could be either a blemish on their skin, or a blemish on their garment, or on their home. And the parsha that we read this week talks about the diagnosis of the tzaraas, the different types of tzaraas, many different types of tzaraas, and the Kohen is the one who is tasked with the responsibility of determining whether or not the blemish, the discoloration, is indeed tzaraas, and determining whether the person must be quarantined, and determining whether the person has indeed been healed of their tzaraas. Tzaraas is often translated inaccurately as leprosy. Leprosy is a physical ailment. This is a spiritual ailment that may have some overlap with leprosy, but it's entirely spiritual. It's a miracle in the words of the commentators, and it reflects the state of the nation when they are so lofty and so spiritually and ethically refined that they have like a supernatural glow to them. They're luminescent, if that's maybe a appropriate word. There's a spiritual beacon, so to speak, that's permeating from within them. And when that light gets dampened, it is reflected by this discoloration that's a sign of an underlying spiritual malady. They're going to be quarantined. They're going to be sent outside the camp. And hopefully that will create the environment for them to repent, to reflect, to have some time for introspection, to realize the gravity of what they've done, and to hopefully cleanse themselves from it. It's a very fascinating law. It's very mysterious because we've never seen anything like it. And both parshios that we're going to read this week talk about tzaraas, the acquisition of tzaraas, the diagnosis of tzaraas, the practices that someone who has tzaraas must undergo, and the process by which a person can be remedied and cleansed from tzaraas. Now, when we look at the literature, we find a very interesting collection of people who were stricken with tzaraas. For example, the first person, it's not even a person. It's an animal. Our sages tell us that the serpent from the garden, he was kicked out of the garden. Like someone who has tzaraas is kicked out of the city. They have to be quarantined outside the city. They cannot be around polite society. Oh, and the scales on the skin of the snake, that is symbolic of a skin malady of tzaraas. This animal embodies the concept of tzaraas. Tzaraas is reserved for someone who caused division and discord, and no one caused more division and more discord than the primordial serpent. But we're also told that, this is in the Midrashic literature, Cain, who committed the horrific homicide, the fratricide, he was stricken with tzaraas, and that's why he was a nomad. He was an outcast. But the list of people who have tzaraas is not only terrible sinners. In fact, we're told that Moshe had tzaraas. You recall the beginning of the book of Exodus. God tells Moshe by the burning bush, I want you to go down to Egypt and go negotiate with Pharaoh. Go ask him to release his Israelite slaves. And Moshe launches a series of objections. In one of his objections, he tells God, the Israelites are not worthy of being saved. They won't believe. And God tells him to stick his hand in his cloak. He sticks it in. He pulls it out. It's white, like snow. Moshe spoke lashon hara. Moshe spoke evil talk against the nation. And he was immediately punished by having tzaraas on his hand. He stuck his hand back in again. He pulled it out, and once again it returned to being flesh-colored. So Moshe has tzaraas. We're also told in the very same portion of the Torah that Pharaoh had tzaraas. At the end of chapter 2 of Exodus, the verse tells us that the situation was so dire in Egypt that the nation cried out to God. And their cries and their yelps ascended to heaven. And God heard their pleas. God accepted, as it were, their prayers. And our sages tell us that the reason why the nation had this eruption of prayer, these sighs, these wails, these cries that ascended to heaven, is because Pharaoh had died, and that does not mean that he literally died, but rather he had tzaraas, because someone who is stricken with tzaraas is as if they're dead. And Pharaoh's physicians told him that the only way for him to remedy his tzaraas is he must bathe in human blood. And our sages tell us that he would slaughter 150 Jewish children each morning for his morning bloodbath, and 150 Jewish children for his evening bloodbath. And this was so barbaric, the nation just cried out to God. And this is this is the prayer. This is almost a turning point where God accepted it, and now God tells Moshe, okay, let's begin the process of redemption. So again, it's a very strange list. The snake and Cain, Moshe, Pharaoh, Miriam, of course, Moshe's sister. She speaks lashon hara against Moshe. She equates Moshe to all other prophets. He's a prophet, but we're also prophets. And that was lashon hara. And she was stricken with tzaraas, and she remained outside the camp for 7 days. And of course, the nation waited for her to heal. And they only departed once she was healed. You continue the story. We find out that Gehazi and his sons had tzaraas. Of course, Naaman, the general, had tzaraas. David, after his sin with Bathsheba, the Talmud tells us, Book of Yoma, page 22b, he was stricken with tzaraas. It's a fascinating list. But there's one person on this list that doesn't belong. The Talmud tells us that King Messiah, Melech HaMashiach, will be stricken with tzaraas. Now, in general, we do find several connections between Messiah and tzaraas. For example, there is an unusual oddity in the laws of tzaraas. If someone has a splotch on their skin, they must go to the Kohen to have it diagnosed. Maybe it's tzaraas. Maybe they are stricken with this malady. But what if the person does not have a splotch on their skin? Chapter 13, verse 13 of Vayikra. When the Kohen examines the discolored skin, and he discovers that the tzaraas covers the entirety of the person's body. Kulo hafach lavan, he's entirely white as snow. Then, quite counterintuitively, taharhu, he is pure. Which, by the way, as an aside, this is one of the proofs that tzaraas in the Torah is not a physical malady. It's a spiritual malady, because if someone has the entirety of their body covered in tzaraas, if it was just a physical malady, and that's why we ostracize them or we quarantine them outside the camp, that someone who has their entire body covered in tzaraas, well, then they're the most stricken with leprosy, as it were. From the fact that someone who's entirely covered in tzaraas is pure, that's a proof that it's not a physical, or it's not at its root a physical malady. But there's a law. If someone is entirely covered with tzaraas, they are tahor, they are pure. Says the Talmud, this is related to Messiah. Because Messiah will come in a generation that's either entirely righteous or entirely wicked. And that makes no sense to us. Because if we're entirely righteous, well, then we're worthy of Messiah, we're deserving of Messiah, we'll get Messiah. Makes sense. But if we're entirely wicked, we're entirely undeserving, why should that be the fertile grounds for Messiah? But that's what the Talmud tells us. And the scriptural proof is chapter 13, verse 13 of Vayikra. If a person is entirely covered with tzaraas, they are pure. If a generation is entirely wicked, then again, counterintuitively, they are pure. They are worthy of Messiah. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to say that there's two ways to arrive at total purity. Either total purity or total impurity. Now, that doesn't make any sense. That's counterintuitive. But there's a logic to it. The Talmud tells us that truth is stable. Truth is stable. Why? Because the word truth in Hebrew is emet or emes. And that's spelled, if you look how the letters are designed, the aleph has two legs. It's secure. The mem has got a big flat leg. It's secure. The taf again is comprised of two legs. It is secure. Emet is not shaky. It's not wobbly. It's stable. Whereas the word sheker, which means falsehood or deceit, the shin is 1 point. It'll topple over. The kuf has only one leg. It'll fall over. The resh also has only one leg. It will fall over. Says the Talmud, any falsehood that is not marbleized with a little bit of truth will necessarily topple over. Falsehood cannot endure. It can only endure so long as insofar as it has a little bit of truth in it. But if there's no truth, if there's entirety of impurity, if a person is entirely covered in tzaraas, then there's nothing for the falsehood, for the impurity to grab hold of, and it just implodes and disappears. Very interesting idea. But we see, again, from the Talmud here, that there's some sort of conceptual connection between tzaraas and Messiah. But then we find a most fascinating interaction. One of the great sages of the Talmudic era encountered Elijah the prophet. He met him at the entrance of the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, Elijah the prophet, as we know, he didn't die. He ascended to heaven in a chariot of fire. What that means is that he transitioned seamlessly into the spiritual world. But because he never died, he can seamlessly come back. And that's why we have dozens, maybe even hundreds of documented instances where Elijah the prophet reappears even hundreds of years after he departed to heaven. So this event, it's a conversation that happened hundreds of years after Elijah ascended to heaven in a fiery chariot. And he meets the great sage. And the great sage tells him, or asks him, two questions. The first question is, am I worthy of being included in the people who earn Olam Haba, who earn the world to come? Now, I find this to be interesting, just as an aside. We seem to be very confident that we're pretty good and pretty worthy. One of the great sages of our history, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he wasn't so sure. He meets Elijah the prophet and says, well, let's find out. And he tells him, he responds to him, if the Almighty, the Holy One of the Sea, if he decides that you are worthy, then you are worthy. Okay. Then he asks him another question. When is Messiah coming? It's the $64,000 question, the $1 million question. Everyone wants to know the answer. When is Messiah coming? When does this change in all of human history where the world will come to complete, total, uncompromising knowledge of God? On that day, God will be one and his name will be one. Well, when's that going to happen? The third temple will be rebuilt. World peace and prosperity will reign. When's Messiah coming? That's what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the sage, asks Elijah, the prophet. And Elijah responds, why are you asking me? Go ask him. That's what he tells him. Go ask him. Now that, of course, is perplexing because where do I find him? If I knew where he was, maybe he would come sooner. Where do I find Messiah? So Elijah tells Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, go to the city of Rome. Outside the city of Rome, you will find Messiah. Okay, well, how will I identify him? Out of the city of Rome, there are people who are impoverished, pitiful people that have skin maladies, that have tzaraas. And he's going to be sitting amongst them. And the way you identify him, says Elijah the prophet, is that when these pitiful people that are outside the city, they're unwelcome in the city, when they replace their bandages, so everyone else, they take off all their bandages and they apply ointment or whatever it is, and they put on a fresh set of bandages. That's how they do it. Take off all the bandages, put on the ointment or the cream or whatever they do, and reapply a new set of bandages. But there's one of those people that doesn't do it in that order. He does it piecemeal. Removes one bandage and reapplies it. Removes the second bandage and reapplies it. And the reason why Messiah acts in this strange manner, because he is on call. He's always ready. Maybe he will be summoned. Maybe Messiah will come. It'll be the right time. And he doesn't want to have to reapply 7 or 8 or 10 bandages. So he only does one at a time. Always ready to be summoned. Fascinating. You get this information from Elijah the prophet. This is legit. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi travels to Rome, goes outside the city, finds the collection of pitiful people stricken with tzaraas, and finds the one who's bandaging himself in this odd fashion. And he walks over to him, and he says, Shalom Alecha, Rabbi Umori, peace be upon you, my teacher, my master. This is Messiah. You got to treat him. You got to greet him properly. So Messiah responds to him, Shalom Alecha, peace to you, Bar Levi, son of Levi. His name was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Rabbi Joshua, son of Levi. So he correctly identified, he knew exactly who he was. Messiah knows things. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asks him the question. He says to him, Le'emas asimar, when are you coming? And Messiah responds with one word. Hayom. Hayom. Today. amazing news. This is wonderful to hear. Rabbi Shua ben Levi goes back home. He's all excited. And of course, the day comes and goes. Messiah doesn't come. Next time, he meets Elijah. They have a debriefing. And they talk about the meeting. And Elijah says to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, what did Messiah tell you? Well, the first thing he told me is, peace be upon you, Shalom Alecha, Bar Levi, son of Levi. So Elijah tells Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, he identified you by your father's name? You are definitely eligible for the world to come. That first question you asked me, if Messiah called you by your father's name, you're definitely in. You're in. But then he tells him, Messiah kind of pulled some wool over my eyes. He lied to me. He said, Hayom, I'm coming today. He didn't show. So Elijah tells him, no, you left too early. You only heard part of his answer. Hayom im betolo tishmo. You missed the rest of the answer. There's a 4-word answer. You heard only 1 word. The first word is Hayom, today. But the 3 words that you missed are im betolo tishmo, if, provided that you heed his voice, meaning God's voice. What Elijah is revealing to the great rabbi is that Messiah agrees to come today, provided that we're worthy, contingent upon the fact that we heed God's voice. Very interesting, very fascinating. Now, when you read this Talmud, you find there's so many good questions to ask. For example, there's a contradiction. Messiah is tying and untying because he doesn't know when he's going to be summoned. Yet the great rabbi says, well, when are you coming? Does Messiah know, or does Messiah not know when he's going to be summoned? Evidently, there is knowledge that he has, but it's not perfect knowledge. But the major question I was trying to figure out in this story, we think of Messiah as a king. Melech HaMashiach, he's a king. And the Talmud here describes him as a Metzora, as someone who has tzaraas, as an outcast, as someone who's hanging around with the pitiful ones. Moreover, where is he? He's outside of Rome. Rome, that's the nation that destroyed the temple. Why is Messiah hanging out in Rome? Shouldn't he be maybe in Jerusalem? Why is he in the outskirts of Rome? So, of course, some of the commentators say, no, this is not Rome in Italy. There's another Rome. There's a Rome in Israel. Just like there's a Cleveland, Texas, and a Paris, Texas. You're getting them confused. No, he's never not the Rome in Italy. It's the Rome in Israel. There's a city in Israel called Rome because the Romans, they named cities after them, just like there's a Caesarea and so on, Herodium and so on. There's a Rome. And that's where he is. Rome, Israel. That's what one of the commentaries suggest. Others say that he wasn't outside the city of Rome, the physical city of Rome. He was outside the spiritual city of Rome. Wow. There's a spiritual city of Rome. Now, what does that mean? It's very mysterious, and it needs an explanation. But I want to suggest an idea. A very profound idea here. The definition of someone who has tzaraas is someone who is not welcome. What happens to someone who has tzaraas? They must go out of the city. They cannot interact with other people. They must be quarantined, removed from society. And the Talmud tells us that it's all measure for measure. Mida keneged mida. What did this person do? They caused division and discord, separation. They broke bonds of friendship and family. They spoke Lashon Hara. They were a gossip mongerer. They caused division and separation. You cause division, you cause separation, that's what you will be receiving. That's your punishment. That's what you deserve. You're separated from society. You're an outcast. You're going to be a person that no one wants anything to do with. They see you, all they see is illness and malady, infection. They want nothing to do with you. Nobody wants to catch what you have. No one wants to hang out with you. They're a pariah. They are ostracized. They are persona non grata, unwelcome in polite society. They're contagious. Everyone looks at them and says, this is a fountain of illness, of problems that I don't want to contract. Go away. Go away from society. You're required to go away from society. And you must announce, I am impure, I am impure. You cannot allow people to come too close to you. And again, as we mentioned earlier, that's going to create the conditions for the Metzora to repent. Nobody wants to be ostracized and to be an outcast. But the essence of someone who has tzaraas is someone who is expelled from society. Society pushes them away. They are unwanted. The Talmud tells us, Elijah the prophet reveals to the great sage that Messiah is a Metzora. He is unwanted. But where is he unwanted? Where is he unwelcome? In what society does Messiah just not be welcome? Messiah is unwanted in Rome. He's anathema to Rome. He's the opposite of Rome in every way. Rome says, you cannot possibly be here. Very profound. Messiah is unwanted because Rome stands for everything that Messiah is the opposite of. Messiah and Rome are just not compatible. And therefore, in Rome, the Romans say, Messiah, you have no place here. You're out. You're an outcast in Rome. We know spiritually that, and even genealogically, Rome comes from Esav. Jacob and Esav, they're twins. But they're twins, they're just not compatible. Even before they're born, they're just at odds with each other. The most tumultuous gestation of all. Rebecca, she has twins, and they're fighting in utero. Because one represents Jerusalem and one represents Rome. And she goes to the prophet. And the prophet tells her, you have two opposites within you. Ula'om mila'om ye'ematz. And these two nations will always be fighting. Says the Talmud. What does that mean? It means that it's not possible for Jerusalem and Rome to both be ascendant at the same time. Ula'om mila'om ye'ematz. One will always overcome the other. So if Jerusalem is on a high, if the force of Jacob is flourishing, I don't need to go inspect what's happening in Rome. I know what's happening in Rome. Rome is in a decline. And vice versa. If Jerusalem is in a decline, necessarily I know the state of Rome. They're opposites. It's not possible for them both to be in the same place. If one is up, the other is necessarily down, and vice versa. Esav is Rome. There's a lot of literature and discussion about how exactly Esav got to Rome. So, for example, you look at the chapter 36 of Genesis, which details the families and the chieftains of Esav. And the last chieftain mentioned is Aluf Magdiel, chieftain Magdiel. Rashi says two words. Ze Romi, this is Rome. So where does Rome come from? It comes from Esav. Now how exactly Esav got to Rome, there's a lot of debate. The Gaon of Vilna writes that when Sancheriv, the Assyrians, they conquered basically the whole known world, they mixed up different peoples. Their method of submission or submitting their conquered people was to relocate them. Forced emigration. So when they conquered Esav, they plucked Esav and moved him to a different place, to Rome. That's what the Gaon of Vilna suggests. Others talk about maybe Esav was incarcerated, or a scion of Esav, Tzipho, son of Eliphaz, son of Esav. There was some sort of war against Joseph, and they went to Egypt, and then he escaped, and he ended up in Rome. But regardless, this is what our sages tell us, that Esav is embodied in Rome. And therefore, the way for us to rectify, so to speak, whatever Rome did is by fighting against Rome or by defeating Rome. When will Jerusalem ascend? Only when Rome descends. Very interesting. Messiah is the complete embodiment of Jacob. This is the force that implements the success of Jacob. You recall that when Jacob was born, he was clutching onto something, holding onto the heel of Esav. That's the symbolic representation of Messiah. Esav is like running away with it and comes along Jacob at the very end and grabs his heel and overtakes him. The last battle Jacob has with Esav is the one right before Messiah. When Jacob and Esav reunite in Parshas Vayishlach, you recall Jacob's coming back from Laban and he sends the messengers. Oh, Esav is coming your way with 400 men. And he finally meets him. He sends him all the gifts and all the bribes and the tributes. And he bows to him 7 times, or before him 7 times. And then he placates, appeases, assuages Esav. And he says, well, let's live together. Let's do it together. And he says, no, I have young kids and I have the sheep. You go and we'll meet sometime in the future. They never met, with the exception of Isaac's funeral. As I just tell us, Jacob didn't lie. He's referring to the final showdown. The final showdown. Va'alu Moshiim lahar Tzion lishpotas har Esav. The final showdown against Esav, against Rome, when Jerusalem will finally ascend. The tip of the spear of Jacob is Messiah. And the Talmud tells us, Elijah tells us, in Rome, he is an outcast. He is unwelcome. He is expelled from the city. Now, there's a Messiah, but there's also almost the opposite of the Messiah. You recall when we give that list of people and things that have tzaraas, the first one we mentioned is the snake. When the snake was punished, chapter 3 of Genesis, Vayomer Hashem Elokim, God said to the serpent, Arur ata, you are more cursed than any other animal, says the Midrash. That's a reference to the snake having tzaraas. The snake has tzaraas. Messiah has tzaraas. The snake has tzaraas. Messiah is unwelcome in Rome. The snake is unwelcome in the garden. The snake is booted from the garden. And our sages tell us that the gematria of the word Mashiach, meaning Messiah, 358, is identical to the gematria of Nachash, meaning serpent, 358. They're opposites. There's this force of Esav, the serpent, the 7-headed serpent. Every time Jacob bowed before God, he lopped off one of the heads of the serpent. And that is a Metzora that has tzaraas, and that's unwelcome in the house of Jacob in the garden. And Messiah, well, he too has tzaraas, but tzaraas, meaning he's not welcome in Rome, in the house of Esav. The two 358s are at odds with each other. Messiah, when it comes, that is because it defeats the serpent, Esav, the evil inclination. Now, a couple of years ago, when I was dealing with these subjects, one of my study partners said something so mind-bending about the person who has double tzaraas. There's someone who has double tzaraas. Who's that? The Talmud in the book of Megillah, on page 12b, tells us that there was a woman who was summoned to Achashverosh's palace. She didn't want to come. Why not? Why didn't Vashti want to come? Because she had tzaraas. She had tzaraas. The word Vashti, the gematria of Vashti is 716, which is 358 plus 358. She is unwelcome both by Achashverosh and by us. She's not welcome, not in the house of Esav, not in the house of Jacob. She's a double tzaraas. Anathema to both Jacob and Esav. A pariah, like the snake, unwelcome in the garden, like Messiah, unwelcome in Rome. There's a fascinating lesson here. You think about the concept of Messiah, it's so central to our religion. You look at our prayers. The majority of our prayers are about Messiah. This is the third in the triumvirate of Abraham, Moshe, and Messiah. The three that travel on the donkey. Or donkey. I got to pronounce that one correctly. I still have some of that vestiges of my New York accent. Donkey. There are three that travel on a donkey. Abraham, Moshe, Messiah. They completely rule over physicality, which is symbolized by the donkey. Abraham, he brings the knowledge of God to the world. Moshe brings Torah to the world. Messiah brings universality of knowledge of God, of submission to God, to the world. What is Messiah? What are our sages telling us over here? It's a full realization of the world of Jacob and nothing of the world of Esav. It's a defeat of Esav. Now, again, I want to be precise. There are a lot of sources that talk about Esav actually coming around. Esav accepting the vision of Jacob. But that the net result is the same. The effective result is that Esav's worldview is defeated. The final war against Esav might be us persuading Esav to join us. Regardless, Jacob's going to snatch that ankle, win, and the vision that is completely rejected in Rome will take over. I spoke to some of my students about Messiah. I'm like, hey, who wants Messiah to come? Everyone raised their hand. Everyone. What if that means that you're going to have to give up a lot of your creature comforts? It's a spiritual world, spiritual ecstasy. But maybe that means forfeiting some of what Esav cherishes and values. Does it sound as enticing? Is this something that you really want? I told one of the students, I said, let's say you want to move to Israel, Messiah is here, we're going to go bring sacrifice to the temple, amazing. What if that means that you kind of have to give up your palatial estate here? You move it to like a small apartment with a bunk bed. Are you still in? But it's all spiritual, it's amazing. Jacob was willing to live in that sort of life because what matters is the spiritual. Jacob is 100% spirituality. And even the physicality, it's all there to facilitate the spiritual ascension. We're still a little bit influenced by the world of Esav. We're quite comfortable in Rome. Some of the serpent's venom still courses within us. The vision of Messiah is completely anathema to Rome. When he formalized his philosophy, he was only 15 years old. He came home and he was tired. He was spiritually tired. He had committed a long litany of terrible sins. The day that coincided with the death and burial of Abraham marked Esav's departure from Abraham's path. And he gets home and he sees Jacob making a stew. Can I have some of that red stuff? Sure. Let's make a deal. Give me the birthright, and I'll give you the lentils, the soup, the red stuff. What does Esav say? Hine anochi holech lamus. V'lama zeli b'chora. Behold, I'm going to die. Why do I need the birthright? Now, why was Esav going to die? This sounds like some kids, I'm so hungry, I'm going to die. No, that's not what was happening. The Torah doesn't say, the Torah doesn't write those sorts of things. Rashi tells us, very interesting. The birthright, it's not just bragging rights. It's something very powerful spiritually. It's the right to serve in God's home, in God's temple. Jacob told Esav what that entails. Says Rashi, Jacob told Esav, what does it mean to have the birthright? It means that you have to do the work in the temple. Well, what are the laws? You got to follow the laws. Well, what are the laws? He gave him 2 laws. You may not enter the temple/tabernacle when you are under the influence. You cannot be inebriated. If you are, that's a capital offense. And you must always have a trim haircut. You cannot allow your hair to grow long. Esav liked the flowing locks, and he had a weakness for the Jim Beam. And Jacob tells him, well, there's 2 practices that you cannot do if you have the birthright. Drinking, long hair. If you do, they're capital offenses. So what does Esav say? I'm going to die. Why are you going to die? You're going to die because your practices, your values, the way you're living, it's just not compatible with the temple. And therefore, when Esav is informed that the birthright means you cannot have long hair or alcohol, and if you do, you're going to die, his only way that he processed that is by saying, I'm going to die. Now, you and I would have said something different. Well, what would we have said? We would have said, okay, well, if you have to have a haircut, I'll get a haircut. What's the big deal? Get a haircut every 30 days. That's it. Once in 30 days you get a haircut, not so bad. Oh, and you don't have to drink wine? That's fine. I'll have cider. Orange juice. I'll drink seltzer. There's other things that you could drink. Esav is revealing inflexibility. He is unwilling to change. He's saying, I am who I am. I am unwilling to change. There's a philosophy that Esav is presenting over here. And the Torah says that's why he's called Edom. He's called red. He's called red because of his inflexibility to change. He is valuing the physical, the material. He's devaluing the spiritual, the eternal, the supernal. And he's saying, I'm not willing to change. Messiah is unwelcome there because Messiah represents the spiritual. Spiritual, that's it. And even the physical is there to facilitate that. How does a person arrive at that? We start off as a mix. We got a little bit of Esav and a little bit of Jacob. A little bit of the serpent and a little bit of Messiah. We're a mix of the 358. Some of the 358 is this and some is that. It's possible for us to change. It's possible for us to change to such a degree that we're just not compatible anymore with Rome. We're not compatible anymore with the serpent. The serpent's out of us entirely. And this is what I say to tell. Very, very profound. Messiah is unwelcome in Rome. And the way a person becomes that sort of person, worthy of Messiah, is by following the path of Messiah. Meaning, to believe in the capacity for change. That's the basis of it all. I start off life and I'm a mitzvah bad. Ever since the sin of Adam, we're a mitzvah bad. Some of the effects of the serpent are still within us. But that can change. And we have the Torah to enable us to change. And the end result is 100% of Jacob, 0% of Esav, all 358 of Messiah, and none of the serpent. When the serpent is eliminated, the Messiah can reign. May it happen very soon in our times. It might be a bit scary to think about this. I think it is a bit scary because we kind of feel comfortable in Rome. This is sort of where we grew up. These are the values that were promoted or are promoted in our society. But there's a profound lesson over here. There is a vision for the future, please God. And the embodiment of that is Messiah. And what is Messiah? What's the cleanest definition of Messiah? He's a Metzora. He has tzaraas outside of the city of Rome. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback.